Final Fantasy VII, a game that would change RPGs forever, and Final Fantasy VII Remake, a game so highly anticipated that my original copy was stolen by the Amazon delivery driver. Hey guys, what's going on? I'm Gamer's Cake, and today I will be telling you why you should play Final Fantasy VII. So what the heck is Final Fantasy, and why are there 15 games? Well, first off, every game is independent of each other, so you don't need to play the series in any order, and the titles aren't even directly related to each other, unless you count direct sequels like Final Fantasy X-2, which we're not going to get into today. Final Fantasy 1 through 6 were Nintendo exclusives, until Sony was all like, hey, these things are stupid, and you're stupid for using them. Use these things instead, and Square Enix was like, I bet, and made the next installation release exclusively on the newly released console, the PlayStation 1. The original Final Fantasy VII was released way back in 1997 and came out to critical acclaim. The long CGI cutscenes and a massive world was truly revolutionary at the time. It was not only amazing on a technical level, but also as a video game it was fantastic. The story, graphics, writing, battle system, everything had so much work put into it that made it the success it was. The game was so popular that it's still talked about to this day, and in the last year we even got a Smash announcement on Final Fantasy VII that I was a little excited about.
Oh, it's Sephiroth! It's Sephiroth! Oh my god! Oh my god!
In Final Fantasy VII, you play as Cloud Strife, an ex-soldier who used to work in a military run by a company called Shinra. Now, he is just a merc looking to make some gil here and there, so he accepts a high-pay mission to help an eco-terrorist group called Avalanche blow up a nuclear reactor run by Shinra. You see, Earth has this non-renewable resource called Mako, which is comprised of something called Lifestream, and Shinra is using Mako and its nuclear reactors to power a pizza-shaped city called Midgar, which is where the first 6 hours of the game take place. On your mission, you meet Barret, Jesse, Wedge, and Biggs. You do some fun battles, place a bomb, and boom, you're a terrorist now. Everyone goes back to their hideout at the 7th Heaven Bar to celebrate, where Cloud meets Avalanche member and childhood friend Tifa Lockhart. After a long talk and a really cool flashback, she convinces him to stay and help Avalanche with more jobs. So shortly after, they plan to blow up another reactor in a different section of Midgar to slow down Shinra's Mako consumption. I'm sure you noticed while watching the gameplay in the background, but this game actually utilizes 3D character models walking on a 2D image with layering to simulate a 3D environment. This may seem jarring at first, but I found myself getting used to it relatively quickly. There are only a few sections in the game where I got stuck because the map was a bit confusing. The same technique is also used throughout several other older games, including the most indoor sections of Ocarina of Time. That being said, there is actually 3D exploration once you leave Midgar, where you can roam this open world and have random encounters. As seen in the intro cinematic, there are also fully pre-rendered cutscenes, which at the time were absolutely amazing. Now looking back on their age, it's obvious, but they aren't unwatchable or anything. This game innovated so much when it was released, it still sometimes blows my mind how it was released in 1997. The last thing I wanted to talk about gameplay-wise is the combat system. Unlike traditional turn-based combat, this game utilized a real-time strategy aspect to its battles. Basically, at the start of the battle there's a little bar that slowly fills up. Once filled up, it's that character's turn, and on your turn you can do your basic attack, cast a wide variety of magic skills, cast a special materia skill, or use an item. Every time you use a move or get hit, that respective character's limit gauge fills up a bit. Once full, you can unleash one of several limit breaker moves that you unlock as you play the game. It's a little overwhelming at first, but the game does a good job with making you comfortable with all your options you have in battle. You may have also noticed I mentioned materia earlier. Materia is a concentrated ball of lifestream that holds special powers. On every party member's weapon are materia slots that allow you to have different builds per character. Some of these materia moves can range from scanning an enemy to see its health and weakness, to summoning giant monsters to aid you in battle. These materia orbs are such a cool way to shake up the battle system and encourage the player to experiment with different skills until they find one that suits their playstyle and build. To anyone who says turn-based combat is outdated, yeah, I'd have to agree. It's not like any good modern games use a turn-based combat system or anything. Final Fantasy VII is an amazing game that thankfully is widely accessible. It's on the original hardware, Windows, iOS, Android, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and even the Nintendo Switch. There's so much passion that was put into this game's setting, characters, and story, and has one of my favorite protagonists and antagonists in any video game ever. If you have access to any device this game is on, I strongly encourage you to play it as blind as you can, because this game's 24-year-old and word gets around fast on the internet, if you know what I mean. Fast forward to 2015 and Square Enix finally pressed the button. Was it another movie? Was it a stupid tech demo for the PlayStation 3? No. It was a full-blown remake of Final Fantasy VII. You see, even though that trailer was shown at E3 2015, the game didn't go into full development until late 2015. The game's producer, Shinji Hashimoto, originally brought up the idea to remake the game because even the youngest workers on the original game were hitting their 40s, and most team members were hitting their 60s. If they wanted to do this with the original crew, they needed to do it now. Even though the team could have just done an enhanced texture port of the original, they decided instead to go for a full-on remake that they thought would better suit more modern gamers. A major change in the remake was an overhaul to the battle system. Instead of a turn-based, waiting style combat, they went for a hack-and-slash style approach, kind of similar to Kingdom Hearts or Nier. So how did development go after E3 2015? Well, they received a standing ovation and Square Enix's stock rose to the highest it's been since 2008, so obviously people were excited. So, Square Enix thought the best plan of action was to stay silent about the game for 2 years. Yeah, they waited until 2017 to show the first piece of the game, which was just showing off some new HUD changes. In 2018, Nomura stated that the project was still in development and that Square Enix would focus more on it once Kingdom Hearts 3 was released. In May 2019, we finally got our first trailer, saying more will be announced in June. So E3 2019 finally came around and we got all the info we needed, a release date, different editions of the game, more gameplay, all that jazz. Finally, the game is coming out March 3rd, 2020. And then got delayed till April 10th, 2020. Finally though, the game is out and everyone can play it. As long as you have a PS4 or PS5 right now. That being said, it's only a timed exclusive and I think a PC port will be announced at some point this year. Can we talk about the PS1 game for just another second? I know it'll be quick. You see, the game was so massive for its time that it was actually released on 3 discs. The 2020 remake is also very big, so Square Enix had to compromise if they ever wanted this game to release, and decided only to remake the Midgar section of the game, which, as mentioned earlier, is only the first 6 hours of the PlayStation 1 release. Please don't let this discourage you from playing the remake though. Even though it's only 1/5 of the original game, it still has a clear beginning, middle, and end. Think of it as a whole game, and part 2 and 3 later are going to be sequels. Remember Jesse, Wedge, and Biggs from earlier? Neither do most people, because they're only in the Midgar section of the original game, which isn't very long. In the remake, they have so much personality to them, and that's what I think is so great about the remake. Every character has so much life and emotion.
I feel trapped.
If it feels wrong, don't do it.
I'm not saying that the characters in the original game weren't bad by any means, but because the remake focuses much more on a smaller portion of the original game, the developers had a lot more time to flesh out each character individually and give them more personality. I would argue that the remake does a much better job of retelling the story so far than the first 6 hours of Final Fantasy VII did. So story-wise, the remake is great, but what about gameplay? Well, this is where fans are a bit split. The remake makes most sections of the game feel very linear, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it does limit exploration to an extent in comparison to the original game. I think my main issue with the remake is the combat system, in comparison to its 1997 release. I for one am a sucker for turn-based combat, and I think if done right can be incredibly satisfying and relies more on the player's knowledge and skill than the remake's new system. Earlier I compared it to Nier and Kingdom Hearts, and while I do absolutely adore those games, I found the original turn-based combat of Final Fantasy VII a much better system in comparison to the new system they implemented for the remake. Instead of a turn-based system, you now have a hack-and-slash system that relies on reaction time and combos. Thankfully, they didn't go out all hack and slash and still added a skill menu in the bottom left. Dealing damage and getting hit will now raise a bar called your ATB bar, which allows you to use one item, skill, or materia spell. Thankfully, they did keep the limit system relatively similar, and it still fills up with you either dealing damage or getting hit. But some limits have been overhauled in order to fit the new gameplay style. I'm mainly referring to Tifa's limit, which used to be somewhat luck-based with the slot machine UI, but is now replaced with the actual move she does instead. That being said, they are still very satisfying to pull off and are graphically amazing now. The last thing I wanted to point out are the game's soundtrack, because I will always admire the work put into them. The original Final Fantasy VII used a lot of MIDI, which just felt right for the steampunk semi-futuristic setting. However, the remake now uses an orchestral score, remixing the original game's soundtrack. While I do much appreciate the composer and orchestra's talent, I can't help but favor the original game's soundtrack. I'll play some of my favorite songs from both games so you as well can appreciate the game's amazing score. And as always, if you want to skip this part, you can fast forward to the timestamp on screen now.
Was it all a dream? Will I never know? Foolish and blind to everything.
Final Fantasy VII will always be a special game to me, as I was introduced to it in the 6th grade when my history teacher made an entire unit based around Final Fantasy VII. Ever since, I've grown up loving Cloud and his friends, as well as that edgy anime swordman. What I really love about Final Fantasy VII Remake is that it doesn't feel like a replacement to the original game, but instead feels like another way to experience it. Please consider giving both games a try if you haven't already, and I would like to thank you for staying till the end of the video. In return for my thanks, I'm including my full reaction to the Sephiroth reveal for Smash Ultimate. If you don't want to see me scream at my screen for 3 minutes, you can click off now, but either way, thanks for watching, I'm Gamers'sCake, and I will see you in the next video. Oh. Oh my god, Alex is gone!
Ninja?
Okay, everyone shut up.
Ninja and Smash?
Everyone shut up. I'm definitely not.
Okay, it's our... I don't understand.
Our survival mode. We're all gonna be disappointed.
Oh my god,
Oh, okay.
Two just happened.
So is Space Emissary 2!
They're releasing Smash.
Oh? A Kid Icarus character?
Master Chief.
You see
Goku.
Like, go back to the atmosphere like random?
Oh, Benja looks sick.
Master Chief
Goku.
just falls in from the atmosphere.
All tab the game.
Goku.
Okay, who just...
Oh, it's Sephiroth! It's Sephiroth! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my
Nice.
god! It's Sephiroth! Oh my god, it's Sephiroth! He just stopped shooting! Oh my god! That's sick! What?
Oh my god, it's Virgil from John.
What? I'm maining him! I am maining him!
Chris has never been this happy.
That's
Guys,
sick!
give Smash despair.
Okay, how long is his sword though? How long is his sword?
So sick!
Oh my
Sword, Lord.
Oh, he's got a counter.
Dude,
I'm like literally shaking.
Why you couldn't
I've
see
never
that?
seen Chris this like emphatic before.
I knew instantly when he cut Gleam in half. His final smash better be the freaking 10-minute cutscene from the boss fight. But I'm like literally shaking.
I'm crying.
Chris, when you're not shaking.
That's true, but I'm shaking a lot.
Final Fantasy VII, Tommy. It's the villain from Final Fantasy VII.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
One Winged Angel sounds so good.
Do you think it's better than Joker, Chris?
That's hard, it might be. Dude, I'm literally shaking.
Mario's freaking dead!
Mario's dead! Mario's dead! Oh my god, Omni Slash. This is like literally insane.
Luigi died, Mario died.
Insane. I'm so happy right now.
I can see that.
Like, I'm so happy.
So I guess it wasn't Jonesy from
Omni Slash version 5, okay.
He fucking dies.
Hilarious if it was Jonesy.